Hello everyone. For today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you something that I've learned quite a bit more about over the past few years. And that is the clock that stands at the entrance to the synagogue. Now, where I'm standing with you is actually in the upper gallery at the back of Bevis Marks. And of course, from the outside of the synagogue, there you can see the clock face. Now, this clock hasn't been used for quite a number of years. And the reason for this is that in order for the clock to function, one needs to manually wind it, which means one has to climb up, open up the back of the clock, and wind it on a regular basis. And so as a result, it really hasn't been used very much. However, during these years, we actually had the opportunity to have the clock, shall we say, restored or in some ways upgraded through it being fit with a automation, with a mechanism that has been affixed to it without changing anything about it. What's happened? Well, really the way the clock works is that there is a series of weights that go all the way down to the main floor of the synagogue. It's in the very back of the closet over there. And these weights, of course, as the clock is wound, go and move that allow the gears within the clock to turn, and it allows it to keep time. What was changed is that we had somebody come in and affix to it a motorized mechanism that allows the clock to continue to move even without the winding. This actually happened because we celebrated the Jewish master of the livery company, the clockmakers, during COVID. And Master Mark Levy arranged for us to make an application to the clockmakers to have this upgrade done. And in fact, it was done. And we learned a lot about the clock as part of that process. I'll get back to some things we've learned in a moment, but we actually celebrated the restoration of the clock through a special service. And if you'd like to watch that service, you can find a link to it in the comment section below. But one of the things that we learned about the clock is that it's actually a bit tricky to know when it dates from. Is it original to when the synagogue was built, or was it something that was added a bit later? Well, what we found is that when one looks at the gear mechanism, there are references to the company of Thwaite, which is from the 18th century, and yet the clock face itself has the year 1858. And so it could be the clock has either had components replaced over the years, or perhaps was moved here from another location. We're actually not quite sure, but the year 1858 is actually a really interesting year because that was the year that the first Jewish MP took his seat in Parliament. And so it could be that there was a restoration or an installation of this clock to celebrate that significant year in the history of Anglo Jewry. But one of the things that really stuck with me from that process is the fellow who restored the clock said to me that he always thinks it's sad when you go to a public building and the clock isn't running. It almost gives the impression that it's a dead building. And how special it is to now have a clock that works, because our synagogue is very much alive. In fact, it's always been alive. It's something we're so proud of, that it has been in use continuously from the time that it was built. And so now when you come to the synagogue and you see the clock working again, it really reflects the fact that this is not simply a historic building, but this is a living place of worship. And so I look forward to welcoming you here to Bevis Marks so you can see the clock, but more importantly, that you can experience the living worship of Bevis Marks. Thank you so much.